In today's episode, we are going to cover the family of legumes, why I plant peas and fava beans in my garden. We're going to plant some wildflowers. We're also going to harvest some rosemary to distill our own essential oil and make our own homemade candle. And lastly, an herby little gem Caesar-inspired salad. Today we're talking about one of my favorite topics in the garden, legumes. Legumes is the beloved family which peas, fava beans, green beans all belong to. And not only are they delicious, nutritious, but they work wonders in your garden. So first we're going to be planting some peas, and you might be wondering, why are they in a bowl of water? So I put these in a bowl of water last night, and what that does is it helps coax the peas into germinating more successfully. So some of these are even starting to sprout a little bit, and we'll just empty out the water here. And we're going to be planting these in this raised bed that was previously cucamelons, and we've grown cucamelons here for 3 years. They've tapped a lot of nutrients out of the soil, and that is why I'm going to be planting peas here, especially because I already have the trellises in place. Peas like something to grow up and cling on to, and also it's kind of nice because right now the weather is a little bit colder here, and peas thrive anywhere from 50 degrees-ish to 70 degrees, which is perfect for late winter, early spring. As you can see my breath in the air, so it's a little bit chilly here. And we're going to plant these at about 1/2 inch depth all along here, about 2 inches apart each. So I'm going to put my gloves on, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about why I love legumes so much. So I've recently amended this raised bed with compost, really high quality compost, and so it's really nice and ready for these peas. So we're going to do 2 peas per each planting spot, and we're going to go about 2 inches apart for each. So one of the reasons why I love peas and other legumes is that they help work the soil in your garden. And they do that by nitrogen fixation. So nitrogen fixation is the process by which the legume plants make atmospheric nitrogen, so the nitrogen that's out in the air. They trap it into the plant and make it readily available in the soil. And they do that by forming beneficial relationships deep down in the soil, in the root systems, through nodules, and fix the nitrogen. And nitrogen is an essential nutrient for your garden. It's mostly what's responsible for rigorous green leafy growth. So it's really good to plant legumes, especially if your soil's a little bit depleted, or if you plan on planting something that is kind of like a heavy feeder. So heavy feeders are plants that require a lot of nutrients to grow. Plants such as tomatoes, melons, pumpkins, squash, those are super heavy feeders. The variety I'm planting today of these peas is Green Arrow shelling pea. So shelling peas are specifically for shelling. So you pop open the pod and there's some really great peas inside. Then there's snap peas and snow peas, which you can eat the whole pod. So this variety that I'm planting today are just for shelling. You wouldn't eat the whole pod because the pod's pretty tough. So one of the key things to making sure you get that nitrogen back into the soil after you're growing peas is you want to make sure you compost or chop and drop the peas in place after the season's over. So you'll let the peas grow, flower, you can harvest some off of that, but as soon as they're done or you're done growing them, you're going to want to cut them at the base, leave the roots intact. That's where a lot of the good nitrogen is occurring. And then you want to take the leaves off, and you can either compost it and then incorporate it back into the garden, or you can just chop it into, kind of big bits and use it as kind of like a living mulch or like a mulch in place and plant your next crop underneath those pea leaves. And as those pea leaves decompose, they will contribute nitrogen back into your soil. And so peas and fava beans are my favorite legumes to be planting at this time of year, which is late winter, early spring. But you can also plant beans, so green beans, long beans, winged beans, all those other sorts of beans you could plant in warmer weather. And these will pop up pretty quickly, especially because we soak them ahead of time. So these will be ready to emerge probably in the next week. And also the other part is that the shoots are edible, so you can make a nice little pea shoot salad. So you just kind of harvest some of the greens off of the vine, and you can just incorporate that into a salad, or it's kind of nice to just have on the side for like soups as a garnish. Things like spring rolls. So you don't just have to eat the peas. All right, so once these emerge, we're gonna wanna make sure we guide the pea to the trellis, because as soon as they latch onto the trellis, the growth really takes off. So you're gonna wanna take some time and keep an eye on these peas and make sure that they're attaching to the trellis initially, and then they'll just take over. And that's peas. Now it's time to plant some fava beans. So I'm gonna be planting these fava beans underneath my fruit trees. The variety I'm planting today is called Broad Windsor. So fava beans grow to about yay high, and they create really big pods that are about this long, and inside of them you find fava beans. These are dried out, so the outer layer of the fava bean has fused to the inner layer. While fava beans are delicious, tasty, I grow them primarily for soil quality and to rebuild my soil. So underneath these fruit trees, it used to be all grass, all sod. There was even like a plastic netting layer here, and the soil is extremely compact, very clay-like, not ideal. We want loose, rich soil that roots of trees can get into, absorb all the nutrients that they need. So every year I plant what I call a cover crop of fava beans. And fava beans, like other legumes, not only help fix nitrogen, atmospheric nitrogen, making it readily available for these fruit trees, which helps with the vigorous leaf growth, all of that with the trees, but also fava beans can also help with soil aeration. So as the fava bean roots go into the soil, it helps to break things up. And also, since there's not really anything going on here except for the trees growing, we're in late winter, it also helps make sure that there's nothing really ever lying fallow on this ground. So we want to always be building the soil. And also, if you have plants growing, it makes it less likely that other plants will grow, plants that you don't want, so weeds. So if you're growing a cover crop, it helps to suppress future weeds from coming up, which will happen especially as spring comes in, temperatures raise, more sunlight. It makes it a really great environment for weeds to take bed. So if you have something already in place here, like a living cover crop like legumes, fava beans, it makes it less likely that weeds will run rampant underneath here. And weeds, unlike fava beans, will take nutrients away from our beloved fruit trees. So I'm planting these a little bit deeper than the peas. We're gonna go about 1.5 to 2 inches deep just because they are a little bit bigger. And with soaking these overnight, they are starting to sprout. So these should be pretty quick as well. And I'm going about 3 inches apart on each fava bean, and I'm only planting 1 seed per slot. This soil is a lot more clay-like than my raised bed potting soil. You don't see a lot of people cooking with fava beans for a couple of reasons. So fava beans are only in season for a short period of time, about a month in most areas. The other reason is because they're incredibly difficult to cook. They're very time consuming to cook, in my opinion. So to get to the part that's actually edible when the fava beans are green, it's actually 2 layers deep. So first you have to shell the fava bean pod, then you have to blanch the fava beans, and then you have to pop out the inner green fava bean to get ultimately like a fingernail-sized fava bean to eat. They are very delicious, sometimes worth the work. And you can see here some weeds are starting to pop up. This is a dandelion. Some more weeds here. And I try to stay on top of them, especially before spring hits, because the weeds really will take off. All right, so whenever I see rain in the forecast, I bust out some wildflower seeds. So what I do is I go through my seed collection and I try to put together a medley of different flowers, and then I mix them up, and then we're gonna sprinkle them and rake over them ahead of the rain. And so today in this mixture I have here, I've got sunflower, I've got straw flower, chamomile, tulsi, yarrow, echinacea, long-standing marigolds. And so I've got some empty dirt here in between my Haas avocado and my Eureka lemon tree. And what's great about this is that this will fill in with a nice amount of color in spring and summer. It'll be great for pollinators, bees, birds, butterflies. It just makes it a lot more beautiful in the garden, but also attracts those beneficial pollinators that we need for these fruit trees. So all I do is I kind of just sprinkle the seeds. Honestly, this is like the most fun part about gardening, is you just plant a bunch of seeds and then you kind of see what happens. And most of the time you're pleasantly surprised with how well things end up doing. A lot of these seeds that I have in this mix are really small, so echinacea and tulsi are pretty small seeds, so you can't really see them except for the sunflowers. And the next thing is we just want to make sure these seeds are lightly covered, so I'm very lightly raking kind of back and forth over this seed mixture. And I'm pretty pleasantly surprised with how nice this layer of topsoil is. It looks pretty rich. It's not as compact and clay-like as the other section. This was also formerly sod and just really nutrient depleted soil. And over time, I've really worked it with cover crops and never letting it really be empty like this, except for in winter. So we're just raking over this, making sure it's nice and loose. And then we'll make sure to water it a little bit ahead of the rain, just to give these seeds a nice little head start. And this will give us something pretty to look at when we look out to the garden in spring and summer. And as you can see, we've already got some poppies popping up here. This is sweet alyssum, more poppies. So those are from last season and they've self-seeded in place. All right. As we've seen in past garden tours, I grow a ton of rosemary, and as a result, I've tried to figure out new ways to use rosemary beyond just in the kitchen for flavoring dishes or making breads or things like that. And I've learned how to distill my own essential oils. So we're gonna harvest some of this rosemary, we're gonna distill it down into essential oil and hydrosol, and then we're gonna make homemade candles. Rosemary's super fragrant. We're just gonna cut off about, 6-inch portions like this. And once we distill this into essential oils, we can use them for candles, body butters, or even to just diffuse in a regular essential oil diffuser. Let's get to distilling some essential oils. So We're in the lab today and we're gonna distill some of the rosemary that we harvested from the garden. And so what I've got here is a at-home copper distiller. And first we're gonna fill this shaft up with rosemary. So what we're gonna do today is we're gonna be distilling to create essential oil and hydrosol. So essential oil is a water repelling or hydrophobic compound that we're gonna be extracting through distilling this rosemary. But we're also gonna be getting some hydrosol, which is also hydrosol is the byproduct of distilling as well. And what we're getting from that are water soluble compounds from the rosemary. So first we're gonna just fill this up. We don't wanna overstuff it because we wanna make sure that once we turn on the distiller, the steam can kind of circulate through all the rosemary. This process of distilling one batch takes about 1 to 2 hours, but you'll see you need quite a few batches to get a decent amount of essential oil. And that can vary plant to plant. And so when you buy essential oils from the store, you'll see essential oils can range pretty greatly in price. And that's because it depends on how much material is required to actually extract that essential oil. All right, so we've got this filled up all the way. And now we're gonna attach it to our water pot. So this is just filled with regular tap water. And I'm gonna turn this on just so we can get that going heat-wise. Put our little rubber gasket on and then put this on top. If you were distilling something like gin or something that you're gonna be consuming, you would put another ring here that would make sure that it all kind of stays in here. But since the rosemary is pretty big and we've got it kind of stuck in this, we don't need a filter. So we're gonna put that here and then clamp it. This brings me back to chemistry classes, but it's not as complicated and no one is grading you on this. Okay, got that nice and tight. So as the water heats up in this chamber, it's gonna create steam, and that's gonna extract oil and other compounds from the rosemary. And then that will heat up, go into here, and then I'll tell you what happens next. So in this pot here, I've got cold tap water, and then just a regular old aquarium sort of pump. Put that in there. This attaches to the bottom part here and pushes cold water into the chamber. This drains out hot water or warm water into our bucket here. So as the steam heats up, it extracts the essential oils and other sorts of compounds. Comes out here, we get the hot water out of there. Since the essential oils and the other compounds are heavier than water, they'll come down here, get cooled off by the cold water pumping in and flow out through this tube into our glass tube here. And I did a couple batches yesterday, so I've still got hydrosol here, and then you can see close up here, there's a very dark, thin layer of essential oil at the top. And just to make sure that this falls into the glass tube, putting a little funnel here so that it makes sure it goes in there. And then lastly, put a little measuring cup here that will drain out excess hydrosol into this measuring cup. So this won't start draining out into here until this gets nice and heated up. But yesterday, I extracted about 3 batches of rosemary essential oil, and ended up with about this much. So this is the hydrosol that I extracted yesterday. It's a byproduct of the distillation process, and it does contain rosemary compounds. As you can see, it's not clear like water, and it is very fragrant. It's not as potent as essential oil. It's almost as if you were to put drops of essential oil into water. And I actually just like to diffuse it in my essential oil diffuser. Instead of doing water with drops of essential oil, I actually just like to put the hydrosol directly into my diffuser. And it imparts a really nice, delicate scent into your home. So we're gonna put this to the side. We also need to turn our pump on here. Before I do that, make sure everything's securely in. I've turned the pump on and it hasn't been securely in, and then it's like a water park in here, so. One of the first ingredients for our candle is beef tallow. So I made bone broth from grass-fed beef bones, and then once you cool down the beef broth, the top layer is actually beef tallow. So it's the fat content from those bones. And some people use it to cook with, but it makes for a really good carrier oil for candles, for other bath and body products. We've also got coconut oil and beeswax. So they all kind of contribute their own thing to the candle, extending the flame life, also just sort of like the different scents that they individually impart. So coconut oil has a little bit of a scent, beeswax has a little bit of a scent, beef tallow does not have much of a scent at all. So we're gonna measure this out. This is my double boiler. So in the bottom of this, I've got water, and in the top part, this ceramic pot, I'll put the oils in here. We're making an 8-ounce candle today. So to accommodate for overage, I'm gonna aim for 10 ounces of oil. So we're gonna go 50% beef tallow, so 5 ounces of beef tallow. People like beef tallow for skincare products. It's really moisturizing. Okay, that's 5 ounces. I already feel like my hands are getting very well moisturized. 3 ounces of beeswax, or 30%. All right. And then 2 ounces of coconut oil. What's nice about making your own candles is not only being able to customize them, but also knowing what goes into your candles, because some candles are kind of filled with some icky ingredients. Now we're gonna heat this up in the double boiler. And we want this oil to completely melt, but we wanna keep an eye on it. We don't want it to get too hot. So as you can see, the oil has floated to the top. This is all hydrosol, and as this is filled up, it drains out into here. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna pipette off the top essential oils and put them into our container. Ideally, you would put the essential oils in a glass container, but since I just did this yesterday and today, and we're gonna use all of this for our candle, I'm just using this little stainless steel condiment container. So I press on the pipette and then extracting just the oils. Try not to get any of the hydrosol. Our oil is nicely melted and incorporated, and we're gonna take the temperature and wait until it gets down to about 130 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit before we add the essential oils, just because those essential oils can be a little bit sensitive to heat. All right, it's at about 150 degrees currently, so we're just gonna keep stirring until it cools down just a little bit more. And in the meantime, I wanted to talk about a little bit of the ratios that we're gonna be using for essential oils or fragrance oils. We want about 6 to 8 drops per 1 ounce of candle. So we're making an 8-ounce candle. We're aiming for about 48 drops. And since I want it to be mostly the essential oil that I distilled from my garden, we're gonna go with all of this rosemary. We'll measure it drop by drop with the pipette, and then we'll supplement with some orange citrus as well as some French lavender. It's at about 145. I'm gonna fill up the pipette with the rosemary essential oil. Okay. And then we're gonna count the drops. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And since we did a little bit more than 8 ounces, we did 10 ounces of oil total, we're gonna want 60 drops total. It's starting to smell really good. And now I'm gonna add in a little bit of orange citrus and French lavender. I'm gonna add about 15 drops of each. And these are more of a standard essential oil dropper. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Again, about 68 drops per ounce. Now I'm gonna pour this into our container. Carefully. All right, a little bit. We want it to be about 1 inch from the top. That looks pretty good. So we're gonna let this cool down until it's completely hardened, and it's recommended that you don't burn the candle until about 24 hours after it's set, just to get it all kind of solidified. And then we'll trim the wick once it's solidified. Welcome back to Carmen in the kitchen. As we approach towards the end of winter or late winter, there's not a lot going on in the garden except for some herbs. So we've got parsley, some dill, chives, a Meyer lemon, lots and lots of kale, and some eggs from the ladies. We also went into our stash here of sweet potatoes that we harvested in late summer, early fall. They're still going and I'm still enjoying them, as well as some garlic that I harvested in late summer last year as well. So today we're gonna make sweet potato gnocchi with spicy sausage and kale, as well as like an herby little gem Caesar-inspired salad. I don't know if I pronounced gnocchi right. Let me just... Gnocchi, right? Yeah. Okay, let me see if I pronounced that correctly, because I feel like I'm gonna get dragged in the comments. Okay.
Gnocchi.
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 Gnocchi. Okay. We're making sweet potato gnocchi. All right, so I've cooked up our sweet potatoes. This is a purple variety. I cooked these at 400 for about 45 minutes to an hour, just until they were nice and tender, and they've cooled down a little bit, so I'm gonna start peeling them. But look how gorgeous this purple color is. In late spring, I always plant sweet potatoes, and they do really well here in my garden actually, because it gets pretty hot here in the middle of Los Angeles during summer, and sweet potatoes love heat. And I usually grow a white variety, an orange variety, and a purple variety. And this here, the purple variety, did really well, and it's what I have the most of. And the color is really pretty. So we'll see how it looks in the pasta when we're all done. And we always have to have our compost bowl. So putting the skins in there. And then peel our other sweet potato. I feel like sweet potatoes have done better in my garden than regular potatoes. I'm not really sure why, but they're also easier to harvest because they don't go down that deep into the soil. So usually I just kind of dig up to, 6 inches of the soil. And then I like to crop rotate them throughout my garden because they are pretty heavy feeders since they grow so quickly and abundantly and are rich foods. They take up a lot of nutrients in the soil, so I always like to swap out where I grew them from the year previously. And in another bowl, I'm going to mash our sweet potatoes. I'm gonna start with a fork, but we'll see if we need a potato masher. I don't think so. They're mashing pretty well. It's such a vibrant purple. It looks almost like fake to me. So this was about 1 pound of sweet potatoes before I cooked them. All right, nice and soft. To this, I'm gonna add 1 egg. A pinch of salt. And a pinch of nutmeg. Just a little bit to give it that nice, warm, earthy flavor that we're looking for in late winter. Just gonna mix this up before we add in our flour. The egg will help the pasta bind nicely. And then we add our all-purpose flour. I think that the earthy flavors of the sweet potato will go really nicely with our spicy sausage and kale. Kale sometimes gets a bad rap. It's one of my favorite things to grow in the garden, and you can add it to just about anything. And I think that at its best, kale imparts like a slightly nutty flavor to dishes. And I think it will be really good and really hearty for this dish. So just trying to make this dough really nice and incorporated and still keeping that nice purple color. And we're not necessarily kneading this, but we're just trying to get it all really nice and incorporated. The sweet potato has quite a bit of moisture in it. The other week with some of the sweet potatoes as well as celery root that I have growing in the garden, I made these like sweet potato and celery root latke pancake, and I was surprised at how much water I was able to squeeze out of the sweet potatoes, just because I don't really think of them having that much water in them. But as you can see, it's hydrating this flour really nicely, and there you have it. We have our purple gnocchi dough. So we're gonna put it out here on the surface here, and I'm gonna sprinkle a little bit more flour here. Okay. You could also make gnocchi with regular potatoes, and that would be just as good. So we're gonna divide this into 4 even pieces, and each piece we're gonna roll out into a log. That's the thickness that we want our gnocchi to be. So we're gonna roll this out to a little bit thinner than you think. That's kind of my rule of thumb when it comes to pasta because it does swell up. Same thing with breads, anything with gluten. All right, and then this is pretty good, pretty uniform, and we're just gonna go through and cut out little bite-sized portions. All right, so that's the gnocchi. You could leave it like this, but some people like to imprint them, and you can use a board like this. I got this one from Italy, and if you want to make a little bit more texture, you just roll it down the board ever so slightly. You don't want it to stick into the grooves, but it adds a nice little divot on the outside that catches sauce really nicely. Less important with the sauce that we're making today because it's not a super creamy sauce, but if you were to make just a straight up creamy sauce, these little ridges really are nice to capture some sauce. Ours today is pretty hearty since it's meat-based with kale. It does have a little bit of cream to it as well. We got our workspace all cleaned up here. Push the pasta to the side while we quickly make our sauce. Heat up some olive oil. And I've got about a pound of hot Italian sausage. You could also use another type of sausage that you want. This is with the casings removed. We're gonna brown this up for about 5 to 7 minutes, make a nice sauce, then we'll cook the pasta, add the pasta to the sauce, and then enjoy. While that cooks up, we're gonna mince up some garlic. This is garlic from the garden that we harvested at the end of summer last year, and it's still going for me. I haven't had to buy any garlic from the store. And I've already planted the next crop of garlic, and that will be ready to harvest also in midsummer. So hopefully this crop of garlic can get me to the next one, and I'll never have gone to the store for garlic. And one of the things about homegrown garlic I've found is that it's a lot more potent than store-bought. I don't really know why, but I've found that I end up using less garlic just because it is really strong. So today I'm just gonna use 2 large cloves, but if you love garlic and you're using store-bought garlic, I would suggest using a little bit more. And you don't have to worry too much about the sausage sticking to the bottom of the pan. We're gonna deglaze it at the end. And we don't want it to be too ground down. It's kind of nice to get bite-sized chunks of sausage in with your pasta, or at least that's what I like. You could also do a mixture of different sausages. I like fennel sausage with a combination of hot Italian, or you could do sweet Italian with fennel. It's totally up to you, and you could do turkey or pork or chicken sausage. Let that cook a little bit more. I have this series on Substack that I write. It's called What's the ROI on That, where I dissect and analyze the return on investment of different crops that I grow in my garden. And I'll usually do that when I have kind of a big glut of one crop where I can kind of weigh them all at the same time. So I've done sweet potatoes, I've done garlic, I've done pomegranates, and I've done avocados. And in order of most profitable investments so far would be sweet potatoes, have a really good ROI. They're a really big bang for your buck, followed by garlic. And then my fruit trees have been the least profitable just because they haven't produced a lot of fruit yet, but over time they'll continue to produce. But sweet potatoes grow super quickly. You can get a bunch of them, and They're just a really good thing to grow in your garden. All right. And I'm just gonna add this garlic in with the sausage. A bench scraper is such a good multi-purpose tool, not only for cutting pasta, but scraping up garlic or anything else you're chopping and you wanna transfer it. I like when the sausage gets a little bit crispy. Next, we're gonna devein and chop our kale kind of loosely. So to devein the kale, you just hold the kale at the stalk like that and just pull it. And we add the stem to our compost bowl. I love growing kale. It grows pretty much year round for me, but it is thought of as a cold weather crop. And as you've seen, I have ones that are a little bit taller than others, and the tall ones are a couple years old, whereas the shorter ones are ones that I just planted last fall. And I'd say that they take up very little room. And what I like about them is you can add them to stir fries, smoothies, soups, stews, pasta dishes. You can make kale chips. All right, we got our bunch of kale deveined, and we're just gonna roughly chop. You could also hand tear this. It's gonna wilt quite a bit down. Just wanna make sure that the sausage is cooked thoroughly before we add the kale in. Scraping up any of the bits that have stuck to the pan. And now is a good time to add a little bit of salt and pepper as well. We're gonna add some Diamond Crystal kosher salt and some freshly ground pepper. The sausage is already pretty well seasoned, so you don't need to add too much. The sausage is nicely cooked, and we're gonna add in our kale. And we're gonna allow this to wilt down quite a bit. To deglaze the pan, I'm gonna add about half a cup of chicken broth, a little less than half. And we're just gonna try and scrape up again anything that's stuck to the bottom. It'll give it a nice sort of caramelized flavor to the pasta sauce. And once that's cooked off a little bit, we're going to then add, for a little bit of extra creaminess, 1/4 cup of heavy cream. I'm gonna let this cook off a little bit more. Okay, while that thickens up, we're gonna cook up our pasta. We've got our water boiling, make sure that these are all kind of loose and broken up. So to cook this, you just wanna kind of zhuzh them so they don't stick, but we're gonna boil this until they start to float, keeping an eye on our pasta sauce here. If you want it even more spicy, you could always add extra chili flakes. Time to add these to our sauce. gently fold it in. The purple's a little bit fun, a little bit different. This is a really hearty dish, perfect for late winter with lots of seasonal ingredients. And then we're gonna finish off with, of course, some Parmesan cheese. To cut through the richness of our pasta, I'm going to be making a really refreshing little gem salad with crispy chickpeas, and then we've also got like a Caesar-inspired dressing. And so first we're going to make our crispy chickpeas. I've already rinsed, drained, patted dry, and then tried to roll off most of the chickpea skins. This will help them get as crispy as possible. So we're going to add olive oil, a generous amount, a little bit of paprika, and a little bit of salt. And I'm just crushing up some sea salt flakes for this salt. And then we're just gonna roll those around to get them really well coated. And then these go in the oven at 400 for about 20 to 30 minutes. I really like crispy chickpeas as almost like a crouton alternative, as like a protein alternative for a crunchy bit in a salad. So for our herbs, we've got some chives from the garden, as well as parsley and dill. And we're gonna individually chop these up and add them to our salad. And for a salad, I almost like little sticks of chives as opposed to really finely minced. I'm just gonna sprinkle those all over our salad. This salad is really good for cutting through any sort of hearty dishes. So if you have something like a slow braised meat or a hearty pasta dish, something like this really herby salad will cut through all of that. And we've got dill. I'm gonna cut up the parsley. And with this, we're gonna cut this up a little bit more finely. Removing any sort of like big stems that aren't really chopping up super well. And then lastly, I'm gonna put in some dill, but for this, I'm just going to hand tear off the dill fronds into the salad. And I always say that herbs are a great place to start for beginning gardeners as well as chefs. It's one of the things that you use the most, and they're really easy to grow and really easy to get started in containers, and easy to just kind of plop into any sort of sunny, good spot that you've got in your yard. And it's what you use the most in the kitchen. And they pack a lot of flavor too. So even though maybe you don't grow a ton of them, just adding a little bit of dill to something will go a really long way, as you'll see here. And to start off the dressing, I'm going to grate 1 garlic clove. So I like to use my microplane here. I feel like it helps incorporate the flavor of the garlic a lot better through a dressing, so you don't get any big bits of garlic like I just did. And then to that, I'm going to add in some Greek yogurt. So instead of making a traditional Caesar dressing where we emulsify an egg yolk with olive oil, whisk that together, and then incorporate everything together, I'm going to be adding Greek yogurt just for more of a protein-packed option and just for a little bit more ease in this recipe. So we're doing about 1/4 cup of Greek yogurt to start, along with some Dijon mustard, and then mixing in another 1/4 cup of olive oil in with this. This is also another good alternative to making your salad a little bit more protein forward by adding Greek yogurt to your dressings. And to this, I'm also going to be adding anchovies for a little bit of that classic Caesar-inspired flavor. So these are really high quality anchovies from Fishwife, and they're packed in olive oil. And we're gonna mince these up really nicely into a fine little paste. And I'm gonna take about 3 of them. And anchovies add a really nice salty kick to anything. And also a good source of healthy fats and protein. And you can kind of just use the back of your knife to kind of like smush them to make a little bit of a paste. And if this kind of grosses you out or you're not yet convinced of anchovies, you could always sub in like something like nutritional yeast or something else to get you that salty sort of like umami flavor. It won't be the same, but I definitely want to include everybody on this. And sometimes anchovies can be a little bit off-putting. So we're going to add this into our dressing as well. And then add in just a little bit of salt. We'll finish off the salad with some salt. We don't want to add too much. A lot of pepper. And then lastly, some of that Meyer lemon juice. Meyer lemons are super fragrant. All right, so don't worry too much about mixing this because we're gonna mix the salad pretty well as well. Okay, so I'm just gonna drizzle this over our salad. And depending on who you're gonna be serving this for me, since I'm serving this for myself today, I'm actually just gonna toss it with my hands. I feel like that's a lot easier to do than with tongs or even salad tossers when it comes to a little gem salad. So let me take off my rings again. Okay. So we're just gonna lightly toss this, making sure that each of the little leaves gets coated in that yogurt dressing. And this also makes it so then all the herbs don't clump together. That's also why I like to use my hands, because the herbs can clump together at the bottom of the salad, and then it's not really well mixed. Our crispy chickpeas are ready. They got a little bit of a crisp to them. They're nicely dried out. And like I said, I like these as a crouton alternative. And we're just gonna sprinkle these on top of the salad that we already tossed. It was really good. I might add a little bit of pepper. And I do like a little bit of flaky sea salt to finish off my dishes. And we're just gonna plate this up